We advise viewers of this program not to seek out the creatures or entities mentioned. The following information should only be used as writing advice or in case of an emergency coming across one of said entities, and not as a guide to hunt them down. This program contains content and themes not suitable for children. Viewer discretion is advised. In the world of the unknown and unknowable, knowledge may be the only thing standing between you and certain death. We here at the Void Codex are proud to present a practical guide to help you identify and hopefully stave off the terrors of the night. Join us tonight as we talk about... You ever have that one thing you just can't get over? Like, you claim to have OCD because something bugs you to the point of annoyance. I have a problem with a lot of things, but one of my biggest pet peeves is when people use terms interchangeably when they mean completely different things. Kind of like homophobes, except for Skinwalkers and Wendigos don't have the same pronunciation, and they don't get misheard as homophobe. Look, you've clicked on the title of the video, so you probably have an idea of what's coming. My goal here first and foremost is to give internet authors some advice about the monsters that they may choose to include in their stories. The second goal here is to give access to the general public so they could possibly identify any sort of paranormal activity that they might come across in their daily lives. One last note before we dig into the topic for tonight. Approach all supernatural happenings with both an open mind but a healthy dose of skepticism. Scrutinize everything until you can't anymore, and then consider that it might be something beyond your understanding. That, or maybe it was just drunk Uncle Bobby trying to scare away the raccoons again. For whatever reason, people seem to get Skinwalkers and Wendigos mixed up with each other. When you look at it from a broad sense, it kind of makes sense. Both of them are flesh pedestrians, or fleshy boys, as the guys over at the Lore Lodge like to call them. They're essentially just walking uncanny valley tests. They have inhuman proportions, otherworldly strength and speed, and an inherent lack of humanity. Not to mention the fact that both of them will try to eat you if you run into one on a dark moonless night. But it's when you start to peel back on the layers you can see that they're completely different beasts. So the Wendigo's taken the internet by storm since that game Until Dawn decided to come out. Everyone was playing that. PewDiePie, Markiplier, and not touching that one with a 10-foot pole. So it was really only a matter of time before creepypastas and the X-Files over at 4chan decided to start getting their grubby little mitts on it. And to its credit, the Wendigo in Until Dawn is fairly accurate to how a Wendigo is normally characterized. The Wendigo is typically pale, gaunt, lanky, and horrifying. And just like in the legends, the characters in Until Dawn only become Wendigos if they consume human flesh. These things are quick, hungry, and dangerous. So, let's break down what's actually going on with the Wendigo. Among the forests, mountains, and lakes of North America, we see the Algonquin native language group tribes first settle. These people were the first ones to actually record legends of the Wendigo. Now, in case you live under a rock or live somewhere where we use alligators for currency, it gets really cold in North America, especially during the winter. And given that people need to eat, people also need to go out and hunt. Tribes would send out hunting parties to go hunting for food, and this is typically when the worst things would happen. Because where there's snow, blizzards can happen. When a group gets stuck out in a blizzard, a lot of bad things can happen. Starvation, people getting hurt, and sometimes it even results in cannibalism. Now, it should be noted that sometimes the one who gets consumed usually ends up being some sort of natural death, frozen to death, slipped and fell on a log, something like that. Typically, you don't see people actively going out and hunting down others to eat them, at least not to start with. But see, once you're trapped out in the cold wilderness, it's really easy to decide to eat your friend because you don't have food and it's cold and you need food to keep going. Now, it's this consumption of the human flesh that invites the spirit of the Wendigo to possess someone. Though it should be mentioned that, much like how a demon can tempt a person, the spirit of the Wendigo is thought to be able to push people towards the thought of consumption of their fellow man. At this time, I would like to also note that the Wendigo isn't just a spirit of cannibalism, but rather greed and hunger. If one becomes too greedy or obsessed with wealth or just gets too gluttonous, they very well could also be possessed by the spirit of the Wendigo. Just so happens that cannibalism is what happens to be the most associated way of becoming possessed. It's that desire to fill your stomach at the cost of, another human being's humanity that brings about this spirit. Once one is possessed by the Wendigo, they start to grow gaunt. They have their limbs stretched to unnatural proportions, their teeth sharpen, and they essentially cease to be human. It's from this point of possession until their death that the victim will consume only meat. specifically human meat, as that is the only thing that they believe can satisfy their hunger. In some tellings of the legend, the Wendigo grows in size with each meal. This is seen as a punishment for its gluttony, and because of this growth, they can never be full. Note to self, invite a Wendigo to the nasty Chinese buffet in the next town over, but also keep it away from the good Chinese buffet. Now, some have also reported its ability to mimic human voices, which kind of makes sense, given that the only way to become a Wendigo is to be a human possessed by the spirit of a Wendigo, which means it would have human vocal cords, so put two and two together. The last thing I want to say about the Wendigo is aimed at riders specifically. For the love of everything bright and beautiful, stop putting antlers on it. I can't find a single source that says anything about them growing antlers. And given that usually a Wendigo is created by the spirit of the Wendigo possessing a human, there is no physical way for there to be antlers growing. Now, if you or someone you know actually grows antlers, then I guess you have an excuse. But you should also be reporting that to the doctor, because I don't know how that's happening. Should be mentioned that varying tribes have different versions of the Wendigo. Some are 30 feet tall and have a heart made of ice. Others are just a skinny boy that really likes to eat you. The important thing to note is that horns are a pop culture thing, and it really needs to stop. The horror of the Wendigo comes from the fact that it's a human, but it's not human, if that makes sense. It's way scarier if an emaciated human being who's turned feral and been taken to the medieval stretcher a few times starts chasing you in the woods than something with antlers, because honestly, antlers just make things look cooler, or very much like fur bait. Either way, stop it. Right off the bat, I have to acknowledge that Skinwalker is not the actual name given to these people, and yes, they are still people. We'll get to that. Given that I'm not Navajo, and I'm actually Cherokee, I don't want to mark myself as a target for these guys, and that means I'm not even going to try and pronounce the actual term for them. Though, in English, it roughly translates to, it goes on all fours, referencing the fact that these guys shapeshift, mostly into forms with 4 limbs that it walks on. Alright, there's a lot to unpack there, and while I would just love to let you sort that out like you're still packed luggage from your last trip, let's go ahead and address all that. Skinwalkers are not born like some of these other fleshy boys are, but they're rather self-selected. They are once human medicine men and women who've undergone dark rituals to forsake their humanity for more power. They become witches, stalkers in the night, and should their tribe find out what they've done, they will always be cast out. Only the most evil people can actually become skinwalkers. While the steps of the ritual aren't publicly known, and really they shouldn't be, the one common thread that I keep coming across is that it requires the murder of someone that you hold close. It's in this way that it's like throwing away your humanity. The willingness to take the life of someone you cared about so deeply makes you less human. Or, possibly from the Skinwalker's perspective, it makes you more than human. They're more dangerous than the other flesh pedestrians that I would love to talk about, simply because they retain their human sensibilities. The other creatures they get lumped in with normally act more instinctual. The Skinwalkers, on the other hand, retain everything from before their transformation. They remember identities, they retain some essence of their humanity, and makes them even more terrifying than the rest of the fleshy boys. And it's kind of fitting that they're more terrifying because they are just essentially the furries of the fleshy boys. I think it's also important that we talk about the fact that we use the term Skinwalker for them. It's kind of in the name, Skinwalker. They gain the ability to wear pelts of animals that they've killed, and they gain power from that. While that's not exactly a new practice, cultures all over the world have things very similar. This idea of getting imbued with powers from different animal pelts. The Skinwalker actually inhabits the skin for a short time. Essentially, they are walking in the skin of another animal. Hence the term Skinwalker, if you can't pick up on that. This is why it's very irritating to see trends on TikTok and YouTube where people are like, oh gosh, the Amazon employee is a Skinwalker, ha ha ha, because that's definitely not happening. I'm sorry. Just stop that. See, the thing with Skinwalkers is that they more often than not really try to shapeshift into predatory animals. This is why all the X-Files and the Are No Sleepers are always talking about how they shapeshift into coyotes and like wolves and things like that, because like what's more terrifying, the Amazon worker or a wolf or a coyote with human intelligence and magic and the ability to shapeshift? Skinwalkers themselves have become more prevalent in the public consciousness thanks to those internet spooky noodles and some sort of fascination around Skinwalker Ranch. Now, Skinwalker Ranch in and of itself is a whole other entity to cover, and it doesn't entirely have everything to do with Skinwalkers, but because I like the sound of my own voice and I do want this video to get somewhere close to 10 minutes, I'll go ahead and give you the Cliff Notes version. Essentially, there's a bunch of land in Utah that's currently owned by the government. A lot of people live there, and they've actually started to record all the extreme paranormal phenomenon. Things like shadow people, UFOs, direwolves, interdimensional portals, you name it, it's most likely happened on Skinwalker Ranch. Now, the title Skinwalker Ranch comes from the fact that the native tribes of Utah saw it as a place that was in the path of the Skinwalker, and ranch coming from a place where people ranch cattle. Big surprise there. I do want to point out that it's just really fitting that only white people have continually tried to settle there. The natives just do not want anything to do with it. And really, who can blame them? I mean, I've read a lot of the stuff that's happening there, and I wouldn't want to live there either. Again, leave it to white people to say, oh, haunted place? Ghosts aren't real. Now, I did not give this topic nearly the attention that it actually deserves, so go ahead and check the links in the description for someone who actually knows what they're talking about when it comes to Skinwalker Ranch. And that way you can learn more and someone else gets some more views, because this isn't a competition at all. You can be subscribed to me, and whoever I put in the description probably will be Lore Lodge or Bedtime Stories or both, because those are both fantastic channels that you should go subscribe to right now. Did I just tell someone to subscribe to another channel before I even tell them to subscribe to my channel? Probably, but we're moving on from this meta joke because it's really not that funny. Alright, my midnight stars, what have we learned tonight? Well, Wendigos tend to be more of a victim of circumstance rather than a cold-hearted murderer that a Skinwalker tends to be. And that's not to say that a Wendigo is some sort of poor, helpless soul. Far from it, it's just way more animalistic than human, even when you compare it to a Skinwalker who actually becomes an animal. Skinwalkers, they're the ones who shapeshift, but they also can pass as human. Now, Wendigos, or at least what we term as Wendigos, have to be possessed by a spirit to start their transformation. Now, that spirit tends itself to favor cold, mountainous climates, basically a lot of North America, whereas Skinwalkers originated from the southwestern United States. That's not to say there's no overlap between the two. It's completely possible, especially given that Skinwalkers can act as normal people, but typically you won't see them intermingle at the very least. Now, how are they similar, though? Well, they're both scary and terrifying, and they both want to eat you. They both have this strange ability to mimic, and by mimic, I don't necessarily mean mimic a human being one-to-one, but more mimic the voice or the vocal patterns of another human being. And again, this kind of makes sense because at one point a Wendigo was supposedly human, and a Skinwalker is partially human. So it makes sense that at some point they would be able to figure out vocalization and at least be able to, like, call for help and lure you in as some sort of, weird trap. Now, while they're both extremely terrifying and humanoid in nature, and they both come from Native American lore, they come from completely different tribes and completely different geographic locations. So we really need to talk about how they're different. Wendigos are far more animalistic than the cunning Skinwalkers are. And Skinwalkers, on the other hand, maybe you can actually try and reason with them. Probably wouldn't do that. Probably is kind of like making a deal with a demon, but I'll leave that up to your discretion. Basically, a Wendigo can only really think of its hunger. Think of it in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which, in case you don't know, is basically this giant pyramid, and you need to be able to master the bottom parts of the pyramid to be able to get to the top, and at the top is self-actualization, and it's kind of what all human beings strive for. A Wendigo can't get past that first level because it cannot stop being hungry. It can't get up to become, or to be reintroduced into society, rather. A Skinwalker, they can take care of themselves. They retain enough humanity to not completely be a monster when they don't want to be. Now, for my writers out there, you really need to understand what the differences are. Better yet, just use them as inspiration and create something either entirely new or just something that's not in the public consciousness. A really good example of this is Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. If you haven't read or listened to it yet, take this as a recommendation. Without spoiling anything, Felix elicits the same feeling that these creatures were meant to, by either creating something completely new or bringing some other legend to the surface. The scary part is I'm not 100% sure which one it is. And also, I just want to throw it out here right now. Most of these replaced by Skinwalker stories that the X-Files over at 4chan keep writing, those are what's called a Fleshgate, not a Skinwalker. I understand the mix-up in terminology because you want to say that this thing is walking in the skin of a friend or an uncle or something. But a Skinwalker would really need to do a lot of work to be able to mimic a human, and it almost doesn't make sense for them to do that, especially when they can pass as human in polite society. Now, it's understandable how people outside of Algonquin and Navajo cultures may not be able to understand the differences between Skinwalkers and the Wendigo, and I didn't just make this video to disparage future horror writers out there. I just want you to be culturally aware about what you're writing about. It's extremely easy to just get trapped up in some sort of easy writing topic because it's popular. But please, take at least 5 minutes to research what you're talking about. And if you already have done this, just don't apologize, just do better. Don't let some guy on YouTube dissuade you from writing about what you want to, unless it's furry smut. In that case, please, cast your writing implements into your nearest trash fire. Now for those midnight stars out there who have clicked on this video looking for some sort of help to actually find out what's been making noises behind your house. Oh, don't worry, my dears, I haven't forgotten about you. Basically, it comes down to geographic location. It's pretty safe to assume that cryptids like these don't have overlapping hunting grounds, so if you're in the Northeast or the Midwest, you're probably dealing with a Wendigo. If you're from the Southwest, that's probably when you're dealing with a Skinwalker rather than a Wendy boy. Also, real quick disclaimer, and it's actually important. If you feel like you are being stalked by one of these entities, please do not only talk to your local police, but also the closest man of the cloth or some sort of priest or pastor or whoever as fast as you can. The actual best, if you could swing it, would be a medicine man, but given how white people are always messing around with things that they shouldn't, you really can't blame medicine men if they don't want to help you out. And please do not, and I mean do not, under any circumstances, try and face some sort of creature like this. This will not end well for you, I guarantee it. And this goes for my writers who have hung around for this long too. Please stop writing where the protagonist barely gets away with little to no precaution made. It really starts to get unbelievable after the 509th Wendigo encounter, and they just end up getting away because they run out of the woods. Granted, I guess that's more believable than the explanations I get for the suspiciously wealthy furry argument. Hey, look who finally decided to make a YouTube video. This only took me... let's see, I started the script in August, and I'm finishing up recording in November. I have a life outside of YouTube, if that wasn't obvious. But anyways, hello guys, if you've stuck around this long. Thanks for watching. This bit's unscripted. Not that I really followed my script that much to start with, but I really don't know what I'm saying too much, so bear with me. If you liked this video, you should like, comment, and subscribe. That would be great. I only have like 5 subscribers right now, and those are all friends and family who I have blackmailed into subscribing to me. This isn't the only place you can find me. You can find me over at my best friend's channel, youtube.com, Crescent Mongoose. We do a lot of stupid game stuff over there. I'm currently editing an episode of Phasmophobia. Doing it very slowly, but it's getting there. So you can subscribe here, go subscribe there. I'll throw the link in the description if you like, gameplay stuff. You should also subscribe if you liked this content, or if for whatever reason you want to see more from me. I don't want to be only supernatural talks. I've got a game review in the works. Hopefully that'll be ready before February. I've got a couple other script ideas to churn out some more content between now and then, because that one's going to be a big boy of a video, and I'm really looking forward to it, but I need to get the script finished. I'm only about halfway through. So if you want to see anything from me and these weirdly odd vocals that I have, you can leave a comment, and I will maybe consider your comment. Yeah. So, really don't know how to end this, but I know that the cutting off in the middle of a sentence thing has already been done to death, so maybe I won't